Today I'm going to show you how to record some beautiful sound beds using Ableton's stock looper. I feel like looper is kind of an easy effect to ignore since it's kind of associated with live performance or making beats on the fly. But lately this has been a huge sound design tool for me because you can continuously overdub your recordings while changing the speed and reversing them. Before we get into looper, I want to start off with somewhat of a pretty sound. So I started with this Kalimba plastic preset. I'm just going to add some glide. And then I think it'll be kind of nice to have this sound elongate, so I'm just going to turn up the global time. And to make it kind of more pretty, I'm going to use this vibrato subtle preset from Chorus. Except I might make this rate kind of slow, but then duplicate it. And I think I'll get an envelope follower on unipolar mode and then map that to the rate here. So here I'll follow the amplitude of the sound and make it a faster vibrato if the sound is louder. And just if you didn't know, the difference between this mod mode and remote mode is that while it's on mod mode, you can actually move the knob around while it's being modulated, opposed to remote mode just completely taking over the knob and then you can't touch it. And since we're recording some sound beds, I'm going to get an echo to kind of make it more spacey. But I don't want the original sound to get too drowned out, so I'm going to turn on this ducking, which is basically a built-in sidechain, so the volume of the wet signal will get lowered when the dry signal comes through. Now that we got somewhat of a cool sound, I want to show the main controls of loopers. So you start a loop by pressing this record button. And then you press the plus button to capture the loop. But the way it's currently set up, it will set and follow the song tempo. So it's going to change the tempo after you press the plus button. And I kind of don't like that. So I'm going to change the tempo control to just follow the song tempo. So if I have my song at like 140, then it will just stay at 140. Also, I wanted to record for a specific amount of time instead of telling it when to stop recording. So I'm going to set it to record for 2 bars at a time. And then after that, it's going to continuously record on top of the loop that's already playing. So now when we press the record button, it will stop recording automatically and still let us overdub over what's already playing. But you'll notice the loop can get kind of crowded pretty quickly, so we can use this feedback knob to treat this as a delay. So each time the loop plays back, it's going to be a little bit quieter. And that leaves us with these speed and reverse buttons. So if you press these arrows, it will shift it an octave, so the down will shift it an octave down. But something you'll notice is after you adjust the speed and continue to overdub, it will not pitch up or down everything you play after adjusting the speed. And this also applies to the reverse. So if I reverse this loop right now, everything I played after pressing the reverse button is going to play forward. So you can kind of think as the reverse button as a direction button. So when I flip it again, it's going to then reverse back everything after flipping that button. So how you can take advantage of these is by continuously modulating them with LFOs. So I'm going to get an LFO and group these into a rack together. And then I'm going to map looper's speed knob to a macro and make the minimum value -12 and the maximum value +12. But we're going to want to set this LFO to binary. So this is a form of random where every 1 hertz in this case, it's going to either output the minimum value or the maximum value. So it's kind of like a coin flip. So I'm going to flip this to remote mode and map it to the speed knob. And now when we have our looper going, you can hear that it's flipping the octaves. And since it's a little sudden right now, we can turn up this smooth a little bit to make it kind of blippy. And you can kind of play with how blippy you want this to be. But you'll notice that it's always just shifting up or down an octave and not really staying the same octave. So we can duplicate this LFO and then map the new LFO to the depth of the first LFO. So when the depth is at 0, it's just going to go to the center octave. I kind of like to have these at different rates so you get a mixture of switching between octaves kind of quickly. But if you wanted, you could also have these sync to the tempo of your project. So you could have these at like a bar or half a bar. And now we're going to want to trigger the reverse button. So I'm going to duplicate this LFO one more time and turn down the smooth and map it to the reverse button. Now, something to be aware of when you press the reverse button is that it can sometimes generate clicks if it's happening in the middle of like a phrase. So now we got a cool foundation. So I'm going to duplicate the echo and looper rack. And this is where our sound bed's going to get a little bit more crazy. So I'm going to change this echo to maybe be quarter notes. And then our new looper doesn't have anything in it yet, so we have to record some stuff. And I'm going to have this one not be synced to our project. I want to have this kind of have varying LFO rates. I'm going to map all these LFO rates to some macros so we can access them easily later. I think I'm also going to add a little bit of multiband compression, not too much. And now this sounds kind of cool, so I think it's time to resample. So I'm going to get a new audio track. And if you have nothing on the main channel, you can just go straight to resampling. But if you do have some kind of master chain, I would suggest taking audio straight from the source track. Then we want to arm both of these and go ahead and start recording. Now at this point, you can see the chain kind of has a mind of its own, so it's good to be conscious of how often you're putting in new notes. So if you put in a lot of notes really quickly, you'll notice it can get pretty overwhelming. But some of these sounds can be useful in some songs. But for general atmosphere, we want to keep it a little bit mellow. So something I like to do to make this a little bit more glitchy is get beat repeat after the second echo and before the last looper. So if you didn't know, this just stutters whatever's going into it. And it's cool because you can change when the stutter starts in the loop, or how often it stutters, or how many stutters it has. You can also have it vary, so sometimes it can play like 12th notes or 24ths. And if you didn't want triplets, you can have it just vary to like 8th notes or quarter notes or whatever. And it's also nice to kind of have a subtle pitch decay sometimes. On some synths, it kind of sounds like fireworks. And it's just a nice additional texture in my opinion. But if you didn't want it to be like super glitchy and interrupt what's happening, you can change it to insert mode. And I've just realized we haven't even added a reverb yet, so I'm going to give Valhalla Vintage Verb. And I've been working on this Max device called Randomizer, so I just key map this randomize button so that whatever effect I have selected and I hit my key command, it's just going to randomize everything. So now I think it's time to take this concept to the next level. So I'm going to group this Kalimba preset into a rack and open up the chain window. And I'm going to go to the sounds tab and filter for some keys. I think a piano might be nice. I would just pick a bunch of sounds that you think sound good. You can think of this as a sound blender in a way, like you're making a sound smoothie. So you got to think of what ingredients would all taste good together in a smoothie. So I'm going to drag in maybe some organs, Juno emulations. Maybe I can filter for some strings, maybe some vocals. Okay, I got 8 sounds. So now I'm just going to open up this chain editor and drag out one of the bars and then right click and distribute ranges equally. So now we can use this blue bar at the top to pick which instrument is going to play. But we're going to want this to change pretty frequently. So one thing you can do is get expression control and then make sure the source is on random, make sure the random's all the way up, and set it to remote mode and map it to this blue bar. So every time you press a MIDI note, it'll pick a different instrument. And then you could totally just stop there and play with this if you want. But if I want to randomize multiple things, I'm not going to want to go on each tab and keep on pressing random and then keep on pressing map and clicking on everything I want to randomize. So I'm going to shamelessly plug my random generator, which is just 9 of the random expression controls on one page. So I can just press this quick map button and go boom, 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 boom. And then also switch some of these to be mod mode. And just from this rack, my CPU is at 20% right now, and that's partially from the LFOs, and I think it's mostly from having 8 instruments playing at once. So if you want to conserve some CPU, you can take a similar approach where you can get any plugin that has a bunch of presets like Serum, Diva, Omnisphere, and just keep playing a bunch of different presets. Just like keep on switching. And I've been inspired by using some outboard gear lately. So I've been using this Chase Bliss Habit, which in a nutshell, it records everything you did in the last 3 minutes and sometimes will resurface it in like a messed up way. So I'm going to get another looper and put it at the beginning. And while it doesn't have a 3-minute option, we can record 16 bars, which at 140 might be like 30-ish seconds. So I think it'll be cool to kind of have things you play 30 seconds and go get resurfaced into our sound train or whatever you want to call this. So I'm going to put this into a rack and I'm going to set it to where the dry signal doesn't get output, but then I'll open up the chain window and create a dry chain so the dry signal can still pass through. Then I'm going to get another binary LFO and then a volume macro, which if you don't have this rack, I highly recommend making one. It's just a utility with a gain knob mapped to a macro, just capped out at 0. But I'm going to map this to the gain knob and smooth it out a little bit so it's not like clicky at all. And then we can go ahead and start recording this looper. So we can have this where it will sometimes play things in the past 30 seconds. So now we can go to different instruments. I remember doing that 30 seconds ago. And just so this doesn't get too crazy, don't forget to turn down the feedback on this. And there's another way you can add a bunch of more noises into this sound train. So if you get an external audio effect and take input from your mic, you can infect the sound blender with your own voice effects. You can infect it with your own voice anyway. And then when you didn't want your voice to go in, you can just turn it off. But I'm going to set the dry wet to 50% so I can continuously put things through my mic while also playing the synth. I think I'm actually going to put some ASMR into this, so I'm going to take the cap off my mic. And then I think I'm going to do stuff like rub some knives together. Shout out K-Hart, I got this from her burial video. If you wanted to have a little bit more control over how often the old sounds get played through, you could get a shaper and set it to manual mode and then just draw like a simple shape like this. And then instead of this LFO controlling the gain, we can have this shaper control it. But then we set this LFO to random and then map that to the manual knob. And right now it's still a 50-50 chance that the sound's gonna play. So we can make it where it will mostly not play if we set the maximum value to like a little bit over 50%. So it's a slimmer chance that the older sounds are gonna play. And then we wanna turn the smooth up just so it doesn't get clicky. So now we definitely have way more than enough recordings. So now the first thing I do after I record one of these is I right click and show in Finder. Then I drag it to my dank bank and then I'll key label it so I can use it for later. Okay, so now I'm back at a different time and I'm gonna drag in some of these sessions that we just recorded. So I just added a little bit of reverb and EQ, and you can hold Option Shift and drag through the sample to find a part that might sound cool looped. And then once you start layering it with some chords or a melody or a bass, then you can start to contextualize this into being its own atmosphere into the song. So I just have like a single like root note playing. And then this this deep reese, which may be a little loud. And then I like to use a placeholder vocal to see what this would sound like with some vocals on top of it. This one's from this goated singer, Lyra. You should check her out. Now when I turn off this texture, I mean, it's still cool. But you'll find this adds so much atmosphere and sets the environment for the whole song. And one more thing you can do with these sessions, which I can go over more in a different video, is slice them up into a sliced to MIDI rack and cut them up for like a drop or something. So that's all the time I have for this video. I hope something in this video inspired you to do something new. If this helped you, please consider checking out my racks and Macs devices. This is how I can keep making more videos. And let me know what you had for breakfast this morning.